Welcome back. I'm Jack Bradley. The Trump administration today designated German-based Antifa Ost and 3 other violent Antifa groups in Italy and Greece as specially designated global terrorists, with intentions to designate all 4 groups as foreign terrorist organizations. Joining me now to discuss is Jason Palmer, co-founder of Together, and Denise Gitsham, News Nation political contributor. Thank you both very much for coming on tonight. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announcing today that 4 Europe-based groups will be designated as terrorist organizations as part of the administration's efforts to confront Antifa. Denise, is it necessary for the U.S. to combat Antifa beyond U.S. borders?
I think it's important that we root out and discover whatever sort of poisonous thought or actions which we've seen play out on domestic territory. We've seen it play out in our cities. Wherever it comes from, we should try to root it out. And I think that going beyond our borders, if that's where things are being funded, if there's any connection or inspiration from those in other countries, as long as we're working in conjunction with the authorities in the other countries to ensure that we're not stepping over sort of territorial boundaries and really the laws of other lands. I think we need to work diplomatically to address it. And that's why I think Secretary of State Rubio is going to be the one that spearheads all of these efforts.
And ask you the same question. Do you think it's important for the Trump administration to address the Antifa threat beyond the border?
Yeah, I actually do think that this is a good thing for the Trump administration to do. There are right-wing groups and left-wing groups that are engaged in terrorist activities all over the world, and we shouldn't be focused on their ideology, which part of the political spectrum it's from. We should be focused on if they're committing violent acts against their civilians, against their populations. We need to designate those groups wherever they may be. It is worth mentioning that right-leaning groups commit about 3 times as much violence as left-leaning groups. But part of why I ran for president as someone in the center is that we really should be making sure that the crazies on both sides of the spectrum are not the ones that we're listening to.
But first, turning to the White House, President Trump is preparing for a cross-country economic tour focused on affordability. Jason, the White House is projecting a return to 3 to 4% growth by early 2026. Do you think Republicans have a persuasive economic message on affordability?
Finally focusing on affordability. It is the number one thing that Americans have been saying they're concerned about for the last 2 years, actually even longer than that, quite honestly. And I think President Trump is going to have a hard time making that case, though. Yeah, I do think that Americans are feeling a lot of difficulty with regards to economic mobility and prices of so many things, a lot of which is caused by the tariffs that President Trump and his administration have been pushing. Those tariffs, the latest research I saw showed that 91% of tariffs that are in fact, put on foreign products actually end up raising not just the products from foreign countries that come to the U.S., but also U.S. producers raise their prices as well. So I think President Trump going around the country and talking about affordability is great. I would love it if he actually focused a little bit more on the policy side of things, reducing those tariffs, looking for other ways to bring down costs and make life more affordable for Americans.
Denise, I want to get your thoughts on this. How is the White House planning to sell this economic message, especially on the affordability of healthcare?
I think one big step they need to take, and they should have done a long time ago, is addressing it head on. It is all about how people feel in their pocketbooks, not about the reality of, prices floating down. They're just not coming down nearly as quickly as people expected them to. President Trump set really high standards and expectations when he got elected in November. And frankly, the economy just takes a lot longer to adjust to slashed regulations and doing all the right things to bring inflationary pressure down. Now, we have seen a huge drop in the inflation rate from 9% under President Biden to right around 3% under Trump, but that doesn't translate to what people think about dropping prices, right? Prices are still rising, inflation's there, prices are rising, and inflation's always there. So I think that there needs to be a lot more proactive conversation. I think he's been distracted by other things like the shutdown, and this is about time, about a year before midterms next year, that all Republicans get on board if they want to stay in office.
Congress on Wednesday tightened restrictions on hemp-derived THC. It's a form of cannabis legalized in the 2018 Farm Bill. So the bill that passed closes a loophole that lets unregulated THC products hit the market. Producers say the move threatens their livelihoods. Jason, are these new restrictions appropriate, and what impact could they have?
No, these new restrictions are not appropriate. I mean, hemp is growing as a crop in America. It's actually a very rapidly growing crop for a number of people. There's medicinal marijuana now in more than 40 states. People can use it for recreational purposes in almost 30 states now. And although I'm not a marijuana user, it's really not for me. This is a fast-growing crop in America, and it does have many medicinal uses. As best as I can tell from what I've seen of the legislation, I think this goes too far. There's a reason why many farmers are opposed to it. And I think this actually will be overturned and turned back in the next 3 months because of pressure from the farm lobby.
Well, those concerned about it, like Senator Mitch McConnell, says that companies are turning legal hemp THC into intoxicating products marketed to kids as candy in candy-like packaging. Denise, will these new restrictions effectively close that loophole?
I know, I think you're right. I mean, any responsible person would say that marketing THC sort of based candies is probably not a great thing for children. But I think it's interesting that Mitch McConnell was the one that closed this loophole because he was the one that opened it in the first place in the Farm Bill in 2018. Hemp was actually regulated by the DEA until that Farm Bill in 2018, and he pushed it hard because in Kentucky, it's a huge crop. And so the fact that there's a saying actually in Washington that pigs get fat and hogs go to slaughter, when an industry doesn't regulate itself and tries to play cute and undermine the very legislative intent, which is to allow for legal uses that had nothing to do with THC. The reason marijuana is regulated differently from hemp is because of THC levels. And so if an industry within the hemp industry, what they did is they try to make it like marijuana in its use of THC, in its extraction of THC, and then sell it to children with higher levels of THC. And that's just not a good idea. They got cute, they didn't self-regulate, and this is the price they're going to pay.
And Jason, back to you. Finish that thought on if it would close the loophole, please.
Yeah, I mean, there are aspects of the regulation that should go through and should stay. We don't want any children having access to any substances like THC and all the other drugs that are regulated because of the fact that they have effects on brain chemistry, effects on child development. So those aspects we do need to keep. And I actually do think this was a tough call whether or not I would have voted for it or against it. But I do think it went a little too far in how it actually is going to affect too many farmers that are doing the right thing with their hemp crops.
All right, Jason Palmer, Denise Gitsham, thank you both very much for sharing your insights with us here today.